the steamboat era is one thing I'm gonna sing about because it's a really interesting time. Because initially, the only way of getting around was by canoe, right? And so that includes bringing all the tons and tons of supplies up into the lumber camps. But so when steam engines first came into the area, it was a huge improvement in society and that sort of thing, and it was quite a novelty to step onto a steamship and be taken somewhere rather than having to propel yourself with a paddle, and deal with the wind and the weather and that sort of thing. It was about 1830 when the steamboat travel started to come into the Ottawa Valley. Initially, it was just a steamboat service between Montreal and Ottawa with large steamboats that were navigating up and down the rapids of the Ottawa and the St. Lawrence. And I honestly can't imagine being comfortable being on a ship that's going through 8-foot standing waves and that sort of thing, but that's what they did. And but gradually over time, the steamboat service expanded itself up the Ottawa River as communities spread up the Ottawa River. And by the late 1850s, there was service all the way to Madawaska. So you could take steamships all the way from Montreal to Madawaska, but it would take you 3 days, and there'd be 8 different vessels you'd be on, each one getting progressively smaller. But basically, each vessel operated its own little navigable section of the Ottawa River, and then you'd come to a wharf, and you'd unload yourself and your belongings onto a horse-drawn wagon, and they'd portage you to the next wharf, and off you'd go to the next steamship. And that's the way it was, and it was elegant there for about 20 or 30 years that this happened. But in parallel with this, the rail lines were being laid. And as soon as there was rail service established through the Ottawa Valley, that was the death to the steamboat era, because it was way faster and easier to deal with train travel than by steamboats, because there was no weather wasn't an issue, and the schedules were far more easily kept and that sort of thing. But still, there was still steam service kept after the railroads came in around 1880. And that's where there was still a demand for steamships. And one of them was from Pembroke. There was a kind of a booze cruise that steamed up to Rapid de Chouachin and back, and past Oiseau Rock, and so it was a kind of a tourist thing. But also over here on Kamineskeg Lake, near between Barry's Bay and Combermere, there was a steamship service there that shuttled people and ore from a corundum mine and that sort of thing between the communities of Combermere and Barry's Bay. And this next song is about that, and I'm sure some of you have heard about the Mayflower and the demise of that ship. As the story goes, the Mayflower sank on the 12th of November 1912 in the midst of a November gale, basically. And what happened was the captain was putting the ship away for the wintertime. And actually, did you know that this was his last day of work? He was retiring this day. And he was talked into doing one last run up to Barry's Bay to pick up the corpse of a guy by the name of John Brown, who died in a hunting accident in Saskatchewan. And they wanted to get his body back to bury him near Combermere before the frost hit in the ground. So the captain was talked into doing one last run up to Barry's Bay, and he did so. And so he steamed up 3 hours up to Barry's Bay and landed, and they loaded the coffin of John Brown and some passengers and that sort of thing, and they started heading back south towards Combermere, where they encountered the November gale, and they were also steaming at this point in the dark, right? And I have no idea how they'd navigate the Madawaska River in the dark with just coal oil lanterns and that sort of thing, with blowing snow and wind, but they did. But unfortunately, the ship started taking on water, and once it got to the open part of Kamineskeg, and it sank rather rapidly, and the coffin that was had the corpse of John Brown ended up being the life vessel that saved the lives of 3 men, because it was the only thing that was floating from the ship, and because they'd unfortunately taken the lifeboat off when they were decommissioning the boat for winter. And if you look up in Ripley's Believe It or Not, you'll see this story there, how the life of a dead man saved the lives of 3. So here, this is my take of the sinking of the Mayflower, and was never a story of losses so great. The Mayflower sailed daily the length of the lake, The ship was well aged, but she tracked true the course. And the crew was weathered, but there was no remorse. Just one more run, 3 hours there and back. At the bay was a coffin to return to the town, whose passing saved others from surely been drowned. On landing at port, they raised many a glass at the Balmoral Tavern amid sadness and laughs, while the wind rattled the trees and the air carried a freeze. Well, the ship headed south towards the cold open lake. Through the wind and the snow they did navigate, but the vessel took water, so the men took the bale, and the seepage was steady to little avail. So they pulled on the coal, they pushed through the port. Oh, the Mayflower she sang in the cold dark waters of Kamineskeg. The Mayflower lies still, with time still passing, but her story we tell. Well, she sank without warning, was sent men to the lake. 4 men grabbed the coffin and drifted away. On Gull Island they landed, but a fire would not start, and 1 man succumbed to a frozen heart. Only 3 men lived to tell the tale. Oh, the Mayflower she sang in the cold dark waters of Kamineskeg. The Mayflower lies still, with time still passing, but her story we tell. And now there are crosses with tall pines and leaves, from ground to heaven looking down on my feet. But I think in that darkness they did love the thought of the light in the window and the shape of the cross. So let's raise a glass to the men of the lake, to the men of Kamineskeg. Oh, the Mayflower she sang in the cold dark waters of Kamineskeg. The Mayflower lies still, with time still passing, but her story we tell. With time still passing, but her story we tell. Thanks very much.